Buongiorno a tutti, possiamo anche iniziare a questo punto.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We can start. Please turn down the volume of the music. We have a French-speaking English person. There are only a few people who can speak French. So some of the English people speak French. But there are only few contaminated, so to speak, Englishmen. One of them is John Tucker. My name is Filippo D'Averio. He is Mr. Plessi. His name leads me to make a number of variations like complex and plexuses. And then Aldo Cibic is on my right. He is absolutely Italian, although the name sounds Russian. And then there is a French person also around the table. His name, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce it. The name is Christophe Pillet, or Pillet to pronounce it correctly. The two of them are equally big. They're designers. Designers are now having a lot of success in the world of evolution. But all of this is coordinated by a lady, Mrs. Paturina, sitting in the front row. She's not sitting on the podium.
Sitting on the... Yes, your job is done. No, your job is going to be done only if you have a little talk for the introduction. Please. Your real job has to be...
It's really unpredictable for me, but what I want to say, I did my job. Now I want to introduce our speakers, which continue my achievement to do something in this world. Please.
No, era assolutamente...
Well, it was absolutely necessary to see Mrs. Baturina to open this session, because this work is done on the basis of Be Open, Be Work. That's the foundation. Be Open started from the great Mother Russia, and I like this. I really like this idea of integration in our way of thinking. We couldn't think unless we had the Russian soul that gives us stimuli. So I'm here under the instructions of a friend of mine sitting in the front row. She tells me what to do. Her name is Gilda. I shouldn't say it too loudly. It's an important name that needs to be whispered. Gilda said that we should start by asking Mr. John Tucker to give the first presentation, because he has to leave. He's flying to the opposite side of the world, so he will need to leave earlier.
Can I, okay. I'm making things complicated. No, I'm going to hold this because in 1 minute from now I'm going to add some sound that's disappeared from the centralized system. But my talk is about something called the ecozoic economy, because our theme for the festival and for the Be Open Interni collaboration is about new ways of understanding, new ways of thinking. And I was particularly impressed in reading the documentation when Mrs. Baturina said that one of the inspirations for the foundation was the need to look at things through new eyes. And I want to add perhaps that we could add the new ears and new other senses as well. My talk has three parts. Firstly, some comments about the concept of a metabolic rift, which for me, it's not my idea, it goes back a long time, is a good explanation of how it is that society has got itself into the many predicaments that we are in today. Secondly, I want to introduce you to what the climate scientists and the agricultural world have described as social ecological systems, the new activities around the world in which people are collaborating with living systems in ways that are not as damaging as the old ways. And then if I have time, which is probably optimistic, 15, 20 minutes I have, yes?
A couple of hours.
2 hours is fine.
Yeah.
I will talk about how these things come together, this connecting together of human economic activity, agricultural production on the one side and creation on one side and living systems in the geographical concept of a bioregion, which for me is also one of the most exciting changes in the way we think about the path ahead of us, is that the geography of our activities will be changing as well as the content. But speaking of metabolic rifts and whether we need new eyes or ears, I could not help being struck by the television in my hotel this morning, where there was a debate of kinds only in Italy, which struck me in two ways. One is everybody was talking simultaneously. Three ways. Everybody was talking simultaneously. Secondly, it was staged like an opera. I haven't seen this on television anywhere else in the world, where people talk about the crisis in very grave terms, but here in Italy, it's theatre, opera, and a crisis. But thirdly, nobody spoke, and there was no mention or visible sight of any living system. There were no plants, there were no references to the food and the water and the systems upon which we all depend. It was all about very abstract notions of politics, which to me is one of the reasons we're in a crisis, is that we are restraining our discussions too narrowly. But I added that bit in because I wanted to start by showing you two wonderful structures. The one on the left is a Jequitiba tree that, if anybody from Brazil will recognize it, it's one of the tallest living structures in the world. It's a plant which is 100% able to grow from the resources of where it stands. And the most amazing kind of micro fact about that tree is that every day of the year, something between 40 and 50 metric tons of water are taken from the ground underneath the tree up to the top, where by purely natural mechanism alone, quite extraordinary by itself. On the right is the Comcast building, the new headquarters of one of the great media giants, which has won lots of prizes for being an environmental building, which is, to me, one of the many crimes of discussions about environmental sustainability. Because although this building, in terms of its actual energy performance, meets the requirements of, for example, a LEED standard building, every other aspect of its construction is grossly unsustainable. It's very high-tech, vast quantities of specialized materials, and more importantly, the economic model of that building is that it takes its nutrients from far away, unlike the tree, which survives on where it stands. Which is why I have this picture of an old growth forest, because to me this whole discussion about sustainability and how we have to look at things in different ways is to do with nutrition and flows of nutrition and energy, as in some senses a parallel to the literal flows of money that we see about on the television and in discussions. Because as with the Jequitiba tree which I showed you, as with this forest, its total life cycle is constantly changing, but it is not dependent on distant places for its nutrition. And this is at the heart of the concept of the metabolic rift, which I mentioned at the beginning. In natural systems, things are rotting and become nutrition where they fall. And in this wood and in any other untouched environment, you have a totally self-sustaining but always changing situation. The point is that you may say, well, that looks just like any old wood to me, and that would be a fair point. The thing about woods and forests and more or less all these phenomena that we depend on, like energy, like water, like nutrition, as flows and systems, they are invisible. We cannot see them. They don't kind of come toward us in the sky. And as it was in this forest, there is a whole dimension to the vitality and the degree of life in this forest which is not visible through our eyes, And actually, it's not really possible to hear. I'm going to see whether the sound... No. Here's where I try my trick. That sound file was a man called Krause. Professor Krause is the world's leading bioacoustician. And what he does is to go to sites, either in a rainforest or in a city, and use recordings to measure the amount and the density of life forms and living creatures that are in that place, but you can't see them, and to the human ear you can't hear them either, which is why I was making a big fuss about trying to have a bit of that sound just now. The point being that the bioacoustician is a specialized scientific activity which begins to connect us to the vitality of a situation which is otherwise not seen and not perceived. In the same way that biodiversity is invisible, so is the energy crisis or difficulty that we're in. Now, I'm not going to give you a long energy discussion, relax. But I did discover this wonderful comparison to explain the kind of nature of our predicament in industrial economies that have to confront these difficulties. So on the right is a man who climbed up the Shard, which is London's tallest, Europe's tallest building at the moment, last year, one of these very kind of daring and resourceful artist climbers. And the picture behind him is London by night, very beautiful, pulsing away, a very modern metropolis like many others in the world. On the left is a painting of a hunter-gatherer 12,000 years ago, being a hunter-gatherer, to simplify matters. The important difference between those two individuals is that genetically and physically they're very similar. Our bodies have not modified so much over the years. But in terms of their energy requirements per person, the difference is staggering. So Mr. Modern Londoner needs, in round numbers, 300,000 kilocalories of energy per day, whereas a hunter-gatherer, same body, different time, 5,000. That's a difference between then and now of 60 times, and the gap, of course, is getting wider. But this is like an amazing fact on the one side, but we don't think about it, we don't look at it, we don't touch it. It just becomes part of the kind of feeling of unease and crisis, which is part of this, the narrative of our period in which our creative ideas are far too limited to the wrong sorts of questions. You've all seen these charts about things getting difficult. Life was okay before, life is less okay in the future. But this is why I introduced the concept, which is not mine, of Thomas Berry, one of the great writers who said, how do we understand the way that human beings, who are not stupid in many respects, how do we manage to create an economy which burns through more and more energy and which requires perpetual growth if it is to survive? That was the question. The metabolic rift, where physically and cognitively separated, is the explanation. And what we need to go towards, said Thomas Berry, is an ecozoic era. And as it says, the words on the slide, the reintegration of human endeavors into a larger ecological consciousness. Now, he died before he could witness the fact that that ecological consciousness is now becoming evident all over the world in thousands upon thousands of projects. And that's why we're here to celebrate creativity. My first proposition is that a lot of this creativity is out there in different locations without being given that word, and that if we're looking for signs of optimism, signs of hope, and indeed where the future is being made, we have to get outside our comfortable tent of design or architecture or business and go and see and go and help and go and learn from the people who are making this ecozoic era. What this change of culture is about is that just being working towards the well-being of man is only part of the story. That's a large part of the modern age, is all sorts of different ways to make our lives better. But in doing so, we've actually made the lives or the health of living systems worse. So the new ecozoic mentality is all living systems must flourish together. Secondly, moving from an economy that takes nutrients out of the ground in one place, mainly in poor or rural places, and puts them to be used in the cities. This is the model of the last few hundred years. That has to be rebalanced so that the nutrition that we take out of the ground is circulated where it comes from. That is what an ecozoic form of land tenure means. That's the spire before it was built, moving above all from a resource-intense economy, one in which we churn things up, put them into products, some of which you see in this fiera, and then they disappear very quickly. We know not where to, towards what nature understands about creating value through time in place. And this change of sensibility about what the economy of the future will be about is informed partly by people talking, but also about rediscovering what used to be in places which we consider to be very modern. I don't know how many of you saw this Manna-Hatta exhibition in New York. It was a fantastic piece of paleobotany or ethnobotany, looking at the history of nature in what is now Manhattan, and asking the question, okay, if we can understand which water, which rivers, which plants, which trees, which animals flourished in Manhattan before, could we perhaps reconnect with some of those in rethinking the future of our city? Not that one tears down the buildings and reverts to some imagined past, but reconnecting with living forms and living energy that could do things that we otherwise do with fossil fuel energy. And it's about a transfer from this notion of power, control, concrete, machines, pumps, to using more natural resources such as gravity. Here in Bali, one of the most famous examples of non-petrol powered sustainable agriculture, the rice fields, in which the mastery is not the use of machines, but the use of gravity and the use of the contours of the land itself. I need some guidance on time. How long have I had?
You are free to go on in order to help us to understand.
And can I just check, am I going too fast?
We are slow scholars, and I think, no, take all the time you need
10
for
more
it.
minutes.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
Don't worry.
Point two. What these changes and these transformations in practice and economic expectations mean is that social activities and ecological activities work together. So this is why the climate scientists in places like the Stockholm Resilience Institute and in universities around the world know in scientific terms that we have to reorganize society so that the social energy of people is combined with, in a positive way, the natural energy of the things I'm talking about. Social plus natural is a fantastically powerful potential, but it requires a new mindset and a new frame and a new way of looking, a new way of thinking to make it come about. And in particular, the notion of the combination of these two. But in Brazil, they have this lovely word called micro-revolution to describe how change happens. They're rather contemptuous of professors and clever people or writers like me saying this is what you must do. They believe, on the contrary, in the power of grassroots innovation spread out in lots of different small micro-revolutions. That's how the big picture changes. And the cross-fertilization that they find to be crucial in places like Brazil or India or these poorer countries is the cross-fertilization between these grounded experiments. They think that's more important than cross-fertilization between intellectuals or scientists. But the crucial thing is it's not about, as I said about Manna-Hatta, creating some kind of return to nature where we don't have civilization anymore. It's about understanding that our cities and our nature are both complex in ways that we only barely understand, that this here in Mumbai is as much a social ecological system as that rainforest. Some have more or less the imprint of human activity, but in both radically different contexts, they're complicated, they are multifaceted, they develop at different speeds through time, and so on. So the future kind of sensibility for designers and for business and for policy is how to help social ecological systems thrive. There's a whole list of these, the things about food, about infrastructure, fiber. I'm just going to talk about two to keep things simple. Food is a great example of a social ecological system which has gone horribly wrong in lots of ways. One of the ways to measure the size of the metabolic gap in food is in money terms, surprisingly. So as some of you may know, if I go into a supermarket in Milan or in London or in New York and spend 10 euros, of that 10 euros, the small farmer who actually got his or her hands dirty on the land growing the food gets 60 cents. Everything else of my $10 goes to other people. Many of them designers, by the way, but that's not just by in parenthesis. In order to close the metabolic gap in our food systems, we have to find ways to get closer between the person who is eating the food and the person who is growing it, which means a lot of creative activity to close that gap. I'll jump over this picture. It means, and I call this a bit like talent spotting, that, as I said earlier, there are hundreds of thousands or millions of experiments happening around the world in which people are trying to find new ways to, for example, grow food or create these social ecological partnerships to our own benefit in ways that don't damage the land. So Tarja Vesala, this is in Rovaniemi in Lapland, just slightly at random because I met her recently. She's a shopkeeper, a small farmer, a kind of coordinator of a grain cooperative, and many other things besides. But her passion is to improve the quality of the grain available to the people of her region in Lapland, in Rovaniemi. And she's discovered that it's not enough to be just a farmer, just run a shop, just be a kind of a supply chain expert. She has to combine multiple skills. And when I visited her, she said, it's just a complicated business. It's simple but complicated, and I need help to make my work easier. And I said, well, would designers be helpful? She said, maybe. Anybody is helpful. If designers can be helpful, fantastic. This is Will Allen, some of you may have heard of in Philadelphia and Baltimore. He's made a revolution out of composting in a very urban situation. He creates new forms of social enterprise out of ways to collect food waste, create growing boxes, growing food, and so on. And he's one of the kind of miracle workers that is out there, not a design person, not a government person, not an intellectual. He told me, I have to tell you this fantastic story about, just to make sure you don't think I'm being sentimental. So he told me that they have these young people from the street who join his food project. He gets them out of the gangs and into food. But he said it doesn't always work perfectly. There was one young man who became so in love with the food that he was growing that he got very angry when some weeds came from the compost and came in one day with his gun and shot all the weeds. And Will said, no, I don't think you've quite got the whole story here, but I love that story. I'm going to wait till you get it translated. In all these cases, we're talking about people with multiple forms of expertise meeting each other and helping. So if you remember at the beginning I said this closing of the metabolic gap is about bringing people together who don't otherwise talk to each other, a problem that all of us, in whatever our practice or profession, have the same difficulty. But the beauty of our path ahead is that many of the meeting places in which these connections will be made already exist, food markets being a perfect example. This is the New Amsterdam market in New York, which is an old established urban distribution point for food, but where now all sorts of food designers, distribution designers, innovators of all kinds meet there on a regular basis to share knowledge about new restaurant concepts, new distribution ideas, new economic models. So the place looks as it did 10 years ago, but the amount of knowledge being traded in that market is incredible, really incredible. And so it's an example of it's not necessary to build expensive new institutional structures to create this coming together of different disciplines. The comings together are often already out there. I'm going to jump forward here. So just to explain the difference between the old model of being a designer or being an innovator or being a creative in business and the new one is that we are no longer the sole authors of our creation. It's not about having an incredible idea and putting it in a beautiful place for everybody to talk about and take pictures. On the contrary, whether it's food, whether it's any of these situations, we are in an ecosystem with many different actors. This is in Denmark. These are the food actors just in one city of Denmark, in Aarhus, where some design students just made a picture of all the people and activities that they would need to talk to in order to start changing the way food is distributed around this small Danish city. Everything from a trash can to a cook, to a van, to a whatever. It's very complicated, and the only way to make sense of this kind of complicated social, ecological situation is to take 2 or 3 little bits and work on those. That's what intervening in a system means. You don't look at the whole thing and try and change it from the top. You get in there, you become part of the system rather than standing outside it. I've got 4 more minutes, and I'm going to therefore jump to fiber sheds. So I think food is great. You've heard food people talk about from the farm to the plate. The other way that we can think about land and bioregions is in terms of textiles, because we're in a kind of textile also city. Again, it's all about finding ways to connect where our materials come from and how they are grown, on the one hand, to our experience in the cities as the customers and using them on the other. So that's why a fiber shed in southern parts of the world is becoming a new way of thinking about the history of the clothes that we wear or the textiles we have in our house. So people in London have made this imaginary map of a kind of geography of textile types in which, unlike now where cotton or hemp is grown in very random places around the world, we start to make a mixture of textile plants and put them into places where they can help each other and help the land to recover. Sustainabilica is this lovely map, a new continent of fibers. And here again, as with the food, the design task is not to come up with some incredible abstract concept. No, the designer's task is to find out who is doing what in a geographical region. Everything from growing plants, dyeing, weaving, designing, cutting, wearing, recycling, all the different activities involved in the origins of food. Who is doing what? Who has got ambitions to do better? Who needs to be connected? And so on. Those are the, if you like, the human resources of a region. All the people do with their skills. And in parallel, you have the natural resources of a region, the plants, the herbs, the fibers, which as well as providing structure to clothes and things also provide coloring and other performances. So it's about mapping human resources and natural resources and finding ways to bring them together. One of the most beautiful examples I know, this is from Iceland, which has had an economic meltdown, as you know. There are some passionate design people in Iceland have discovered or rediscovered that the lichen on the rocks, which gives the beautiful color to Iceland, and the lichen on the trees and the bushes have incredible properties that are not appreciated by the people who make fiber and textiles. So dozens, nearly 100 farmers, helped by designers and fashion people, are now looking around the landscape for very different types of resources in terms of either pigmentation or of fiber, and they're beginning to invent new types of clothing, new types of textiles, 100% from the resources of what looks like a barren, empty island. So here you have the creativity is taking what exists already, combining it in new ways, bringing in scientific knowledge where necessary, bringing in commercial knowledge where necessary, but creating totally new combinations of those things, and that is the creative act. And very beautiful it is too, and the same sort of map from the soil to the skin. Okay, I'll finish on this point. Philippe talked about the kind of sixth sense, the kind of necessity to move beyond our traditional, very word-based, very visual-based culture. The metabolic rift, the fact that we don't even care or know about what is happening in nature, dates back to a long time ago when we learned forms of representation that are abstract and symbolic. So we celebrate culture which has the power to reason abstractly, the power to create symbols about things we cannot see. But those same achievements of our culture are also killing us because they have rendered us indifferent, to put it neutrally, to the conditions of the natural systems upon which we depend to live. So for me, the future is about, okay, let's celebrate the symbolic, let's celebrate the abstract, let's celebrate the language that we have, fine, but put that beside and with a reconnection with natural systems if we're going to have the possibility to thrive in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You put your finger on the problem. We are going to solve it in a half an hour, don't worry, yes. We are committed to solve it in a very short time. No, la questione è che...
So this is a very important topic. What can happen in the future with respect to the consumption level we have achieved so far? Can we still consume so much? What kind of life can we think of if we eat the planet? So this is the topic. What kind of feeling? And we're going to talk about the sixth sense. So should we figure out a word based on the five senses, or could there be a sixth sense coming from the Middle Ages that helped us feel that we are here, experience the word physically? We can feel the pleasure of the word. So this is another topic. So from an objective point of view, this is a very complex and complicated topic. So I'd like to show you a small bit of a video by Fabrizio Plessi, because this video is kind of an answer to the complexity of the word. Artistic creativity has the right to evolve in a specific place that doesn't move, because it's communication that moves, it's not goods that move, and creativity is not strictly linked only to the consumption of energy. He just eats up a steak a week and that's enough. He just drink water and eats bread. So this video lasts 2 hours and a half, so maybe it's a bit too long. I think we'll cut it because Aldo Civic can't stay here for more than 1 hour without popcorn. So can we show the video, please, if you push the right button? So here we come.
Fabrizio Plessi e le sue grandi video installazioni, dove l'arte non si occupa di ciò che si vede dentro la televisione, ma di ciò che si fa con la televisione. Idea e progetto per innalzare la temperatura emotiva di una scatola elettronica fredda ma ricca di magia. Plessi è un antico druido cattolico, capace di trasformare un qualsiasi spazio vuoto in un mondo emozionale, portatore di echi, culture e di storie lontane.
Io sono un grande viaggiatore, credo che il viaggio di un artista sia una cosa importantissima. Io in questi viaggi ho dei materiali, dei disegni, degli oggetti che poi riportati qui nel mio studio io li reinvento e li manipolo e per cui tutti questi oggetti e tutte queste cose diventano.
So all these things and these objects become a poetic artwork.
Dedicato.
This is Bombay. So the Washrooms by Pasolini.
A Bombay colpiscono.
Here the Dobby Gut strike. So the public washrooms are there waiting for you. Among the heat, the water, the smoke, the cries, the cotton. And so the perception comes. The art piece is there, intact, untouched, beautiful. I just had to describe it. These washrooms with washboards.
Plessi.
Plessi, a voyager, a traveler, an anthropologist. He's an observer, and he belongs to the different cultures he meets. This is Bronx. This is the first idea I had about it. Here it comes, a TV set. This is the Bronx that is reflected in the TV set screen, Bronx. Behind the grids, behind the iron grids, isolation, separation, uneasiness. The knives in the heart, behind the surface of the screen. It's a radical piece that is not supposed to describe, but it just lives out of strong signals. Through a direct, straightforward sign, memories are created and life starts flowing very quickly in the pixels of these monumental video installations. It's a frozen, fixed life that looks at man and smiles at him. This is Harlem, the flowers of Harlem. Here's there's the wind that blows over Harlem. Harlem, the Holland geometry of flowers flowing in the wind, full of colors. There's electronic grid.
disegnare Venezia.
Drawing Venice, designing Venice is different compared to Berlin, Paris, or New York. Venice has its own atmosphere. When I draw, the water reflections come into the paper sheet and they modify its contours. Everything becomes more fluid. This is Pompeii. It's a flow. Pompeii. It's a water pool. It's narrow, it's long, with dust and sun. We can even walk on memories. It's a mosaic with shiny white tesseras. It flows just like history under our feet.
Questi diventeranno.
So these will become stones and screens. Just like an alchemist, I try to combine different elements coming from the electronics and TV with other elements coming from the art, just like coal, wood. All these elements are combined in a bizarre mixture that creates the typical poetics of my work. This is Faz.
Fez.
There are shadows, exotic, warm shadows, circular poles, modular geometry that comes over and over, saffron, mind, poppies, red poppies that is spread everywhere, craftsmanship that has been there forever, with its primitive taste.
Non vi voglio interrompere, però
This video was an introduction to understand who Plessis is and what he does. So it's a very long video, so I don't think we have time enough to watch it. At this stage, I like to talk about the fact that he's a multimedia artist and there are no travel costs. All he does it in Venice, and he collects his memories and experiences there. So he doesn't move. It's just his mind that moves. Things do not move. And so this is quite interesting, and it relates to what John Tucker has said. Do we have the right to keep on consuming the earth resources to have strawberries at Christmas here in Milan? So I think we can open up a debate. I think that people from Chile agree with it. The people from Milan agree with it. The strawberries have no voice, so they can't say anything at all. But if you do not live in Milan, if you do not live in Chile, we might ask this question. I asked my students to create a project where each strawberry was a teaspoon of oil. So every single time you eat a strawberry, you eat a teaspoon of oil. Is it right? Isn't it right? But this is the question we should ask. What kind of evolution can we think of? If we all were artists, that's okay. We can close all of the artists in a building in Venice, and that's okay. I think that Gibbage works in Venice as well. So is creativity, is individual creativity the answer to a world which is made up of goods and products? I have been working for almost 50 years. I have been an artist for almost 50 years, and I've seen so many important changes. I work with technology, I work with TV, I am an archaeologist, and 50 years ago, I had understood what would happen in terms of the boom of technologies. So that's why I was always out of the context. I was very much ahead. The art pieces you have just seen were created 20, 25, 30 years ago. So these art pieces come from cultural archaeology. I wanted to use technology, and technology needs to be used, otherwise technology will use us. I was teacher in Cologne, and my topic was how to make technologies human. It's very important to make technologies human. If we lack the technical consciousness of what we want, we can't look at the future. So this is what this revolution stands for. This technological revolution. There have been so many avant-garde movements. When I did my things with video installations in Italy, people were not that interested. There were Cassinara, Morlotti, Guttuso, Minnico, a very bad bourgeois painting. And when I installed 3 TV sets, it was something completely crazy, but I was some sort of lonely traveler, and I started sailing through the world of art, through many storms, and I knew where I was heading to. Revolutionary changes have been a lot in the last years. If you go to a Biennale today, you see the big screens, big size, photographs, pixels. All this comes from technology. It exists today, but it didn't exist in the past. So we try to do things, I try to do things that other people didn't understand. You have just seen Bronx. Bronx is an art piece that dates back to 1986, and with TV sets. And for 2 days, these TV sets were installed out of the Biennale because they didn't want these TV sets in, because these TV sets were not considered as art pieces. So I worked with Bjorn Vega in terms of the technical materials, but times were different at that time. Today, we can access to any technologies. Any guy who wants a very big screen can have it quite quickly, but what is he going to do with this screen? What's the contents? What do we fill it with? The matter is not technology. The matter is what we do through technology. What we fill technology with a computer, with a pen. What is important is what you say with your computer, with your screen, with your pen. So the means is not the message. The means influence the message. So this is why I am different from McLuhan. Today, everyone has access to media, and we should have a much stronger historical consciousness so that we can make the most of all the means and the tools. That's why today technology is not used properly, because we should be aware of what technology stands for so that we can combine our historical consciousness with technological materials that we use today. In the past, things were different. If our head opens up to bigger ideas, it will never go back to its original format. Just think of it. And we could sleep well just with this only thought. Thank you. It's quite reassuring. So how do we tackle such a complex topic? Where should we start from? So first of all, the future will be there. We're almost sure of it, because there are people that say that we should abolish the future, and we do not know which future we are talking about. Appetites are contradictory. There was an old professor in the 19th century in Germany with a long beard who had tremendous consequences on modern life. He was in Germany and he thought that one day capitalism would eat up the world. This old professor was right, because sometimes we might think that capitalism wants to eat out the world, but the world to be eaten up is not that big, because what could be eaten up was eaten up. What kind of future can we think of? There are different ideas, softer and harder ideas. According to one idea, well, it was possible to win the elections. There's a crazy guy in Italy who kind of won the elections with this idea. He wants to create a global government and he will be the president. And many people in Italy actually believed him. There's a dream, and it's a terrible dreams at the horizon. Then there are other positions. There are positions from a French thinker, Latouche. He says that we could keep on developing, we could keep on progressing, but we could completely change the trend. So it's better to eat vegetables that are grown here in Milan instead of eating vegetables coming from Angola. It's such a revolutionary idea, because people living in Angola do not like it, because they grow vegetables and they want us to buy these vegetables. So there is no straightforward answer. Recently, I've had a very serious debate with one of the most important ecologists in Lombardy, Guglielmo Mozzoni. He's 96 years old, and he has always dealt with architecture, aesthetics, and agriculture. And I told him we shouldn't give Lombardy cows Angola vegetables to produce milk. But if we don't do that, the people from Angola do not sell their vegetables. So the question is very complicated. We can't give any answer, but we can tackle this topic. So I'm going to waste some other time now. If you have a look around here at the exhibition in the courtyard, you will find something very interesting. There's a specific use of sustainable materials, just like wood, for instance, stone, sometimes metals. So I'm talking about materials that can last longer than materials that used to be fashionable 40 years ago. For instance, there were formica in the past, but it broke. You had to put it in the bin and then buy more. Now you can buy less. Please have a look at these marvelous marble art pieces. When we use them, they improve, they get better, they do not get worse. So they do not decline, but they have a future. There is no answer, so maybe only our guy, Davide Oldani, has an answer. So what kind of world can we think of? What kind of future can we think of? how will the future look like in the future? What kind of satisfaction could we look for in the future? First of all, I like to have a secret bank account in Switzerland with loads of money. So maybe the word can die, provided that I can have money in a Swiss account. And many people actually try to get there, and many bankers are very happy. Another idea, we could think of a word that continually grows from an industrial point of view, just like in the 30s we thought of, or just like in the Metropolis movie by Fritz Lang, loads of smoke. I like smoke. We could wear dark clothes. It's much more fashionable, but I don't think that it's possible. Then Latouche says, so maybe an underdevelopment, so many Fabrizio Plessi. So we do not create new products, and we can think of other things. We can be all artists. We can be creative guys. I think it's easier to do that if you live in Venice and not in South America. We can't be all creative designers. That's why I'm interested in the opinions of these two creative guys over here. They're great, and they're very tall as well. They're not just great, they're very tall. Why are they great? Because they can think of alternative pathways. A couple of minutes more. I do like this topic. There's something that I like a lot in design with respect to designers, fashion designers, and stylism. So I do like fashion designers. It's really interesting. It's fascinating. We can choose different colors for trousers, but designers and design are different. If we design, we have a vision of the word. There are some design objects that turned into timeless objects. For instance, the Barcelona chairs or specific designs are sustainable because they include a vision of the word or utopia as well. So design is the exercise of utopia serving the product that is beneficial to the product, and these products can be beneficial to a new vision of how we consume our daily life resources. So that's why it's important to have here two designers and a cook. Can I call you cook and not chef? Because you actually are a cook. So let's give the floor to the cook first of all, because you already cook your own things, your designer things. So let's start by our cook. He has to set up a dialogue with materials, with ingredients, with differences. If a cook has to do the same thing as the Tierra del Fuego until Stockholm, he just has to find one only potato that is acceptable by anyone. So if the cook wants to operate in a shorter supply chain, he could be more creative, so maybe he could consume more carrots and less oil. So please, Davide, tell us something about the balance between carrots and oil.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon. I have a few slides that I would like to show you. So carrots and oil, first time I've been asked such a question. It's actually a bit hard to give an answer. Well, I have to ask these questions, but I can simplify, because otherwise Gilda would scold me. So what is the relationship between carrots and oil? I can make the same comparison with onions, because I use a lot of onions, from Topea especially, to reduce the oil consumption, or cherries and jet aircraft. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to thank the University of Milan. It's an important university. For a cook, it's not such a common opportunity. with a few slides. And if you have questions, of course, I'll be glad to answer. If Philippe has any comment or questions to ask, since he didn't accept my invitation to try my food, he can only speak without tasting, but that's Gilda's fault. Anyway, it's always hard for me to speak in front of an audience, to speak also of my job. But I can tell you, for me, it's much easier to be in a kitchen and cook and talk by letting you taste my food. I'll try to do my best, however. So the first step, let me explain the project to then answer the question about carrots and oil. It's important to give that explanation. The project behind DO, it starts with a dream and with the idea and desire to do something for other people. So cooking people to make people feel good. I like talking about food, especially when I think that food can make people feel good. Rolf said, you can love well, think well, unless you eat well. And I think he's right. Food is the only thing that allows us to be born, grow, and stays with us until the end throughout life. That's the only thing that we should respect. So that's why I decided to be a cook. I had passion initially. Now I keep working as a cook because what makes me happiest is to see our guests getting out of my house or my restaurant happy because he ate good food and therefore he feels good. That's the only way for me to live well, is to eat well. This is the presentation of my project, and then I will get to design and to the ingredients, which is what makes the project come true. DO is a brand. It's quick to communicate. It's immediate in terms of ability to remember it, for good or for worse, and also it's my initials. For good or for worse, because I'm always there in the first person on the front row, and people should remember quickly when they eat well, and just as quickly they have to remember when they do not eat well and they leave us behind. So calling my project with 2 letters, it was a way to make a quick impact on the people who are interested in such a project. So as soon as they hear DO, they have to remember that. The claim is a claim that identifies the mission. So what I wanted to do is to rediscover the tradition in Italian cuisine using local products and especially products from the same season, which are the ingredients that make a difference. Seasonal products make a difference for 2 main reasons. First of all, it guarantees quality, and you have the taste, the real taste of the product. Secondly, it's a topic that I wouldn't mention 10 years ago, but today I need to say it out loud. This is what allows us to offer an added value to our activity, also economic value. If you buy a strawberry in June, you get the very best of the product and of the taste and the lowest cost. Humans have been so good at hurting themselves to offer cherries and strawberries in December that obliged us to understand that those cherries and strawberries, they're nice and red, that they may be good, but now we are debating what the future will be like and what we should do. For sure, there will be a future. The future is in our hands. The future implies, however, to distinguish seasons quite clearly. Only by distinguishing well the season can we reach a more uniform future. This is the prosecution. I started calling my restaurant DO because I wanted to cook for people in order to make people feel good. The project has improved over the years to the point that we defined our own name and identity that makes us stand out from anyone else. We are different. And we have an idea which is unique, and we called it pop, to be in line with the present time. Everybody's realized now that in order to be good, you have to be accessible. We were obliged to do so because of the economy, and everything that you read on the papers, points to that direction. The conditions of common people, what it looks like on a daily basis. So the idea was to create a pop type of cuisine. This opened up an opportunity to say that pop in cuisine means accessibility and quality. So it's a popular or a people-oriented cuisine and not a popular cuisine. If you do a pop cuisine, you offer a cuisine where everybody, all of us, can be involved, part of it, and we can taste the products. The whole project starts from looking at what we all have. We all have a palate. We have the tongue that perceives the various tastes, feelings, hot, cold, sweet, sour. So as a cook, I have to work on the palate to cook good dishes, to cut a long story short. So good food should be offered to as many people as possible. Pop cuisine doesn't mean trivial cuisine. It means simple cuisine. We talked about solid base. A solid base is the most important ingredient. In order to get to the tip of the pyramid, to then start with the Cuisine Pop project, I think you need solid, sound bases. Sound bases are built through masters, through schools, the masters that you follow over time, for good or for worse, so never deny what the master taught you. I was lucky enough to work with Alain Ducasse, Gualtiero Macchieri, Galoche, Pierre Main in Paris, and others in London, and so on and so forth. So the sound basis was built based on the teachings of those masters, and then I applied it to international cuisine. When we talk about cuisine, many times we deal with a topic that's bigger than it is thought to be bigger than it is and more complex than it really is. Well, we were born hunting and picking and eating vegetables and fruit. And today, in 2013, we are offering a destructured nouvelle cuisine. Someone is now calling it a pop cuisine that is always based on 4 ingredients, which are those ingredients that we should refine and make more accessible. What has changed in the cuisine in the past 30 years is the proportions. The only certain thing that has changed. When I say vegetable fruits and vegetables, I also include herbs and so on and so forth, which is quite interesting. It's gaining more and more ground, and I appreciate those herbs very much. Now, reaching to the tip of the pyramid, if you look at the tip, it's not an ending point, because my interest is always very high. I'm never there. I should always reach a point where I still need some adrenaline to carry on, and I have to find new ideas to move on. I find new ideas when talking with colleagues, traveling around the world, which is very important, and keep your eyes open and keep your mind open when you travel around the world to perceive any possible change or evolution in what I do as a job, to then reach what I call the pop cuisine. I'd like to quickly touch upon the world of kitchen design. I do not agree on the terminology which is used for food design. I totally disagree with that. First and foremost, in order to communicate well, you have to use the right words. Philip said, "Are you not offended if I call you a cook?" Well, that's what I am. I'm a cook. I may be a chief cook, but that's a different story. So words are important. It's wrong to call someone a chef to identify what you do in the kitchen, because it should be a chef de cuisine in correct French. Chef is the boss of any activity. So when I talk about my job, I like to be clear with words. In the field of design, my approach was much more normal than it may look. I actually call it food design and not just design. Because what I need in order to build these objects that I designed and also had manufactured and are available for sale, what I did was to make my dream come true, open up my business, and look at people. And only by looking at my guests and understanding the needs of my guests did I start working on something that could make service better or more accessible by the waiter. Well, more accessible to the waiter as well as to the host, in order to have something different from the typical big plates or a huge number of forks and knives, to then think of the eco-sustainability of the project. With this cutlery that I call Passepartout, I minimize the use of detergents, water, manpower, so less stress for the person washing dishes. So in our limited reality, after a few years, we had a return too. This hybrid is a piece of cutlery which is used to taste modern cuisine. In most cases, this is what we offer, not at home, but in restaurants. This is what you mainly find at Nouvelle Cuisine, bistro, or any type of restaurant. Of course, you still find spaghetti or ribs or whatever. There's this trend of preparing the product in the kitchen and serve it clean to the guests, so that the guests may have a direct impact on the total taste of the dish. So that's why I designed this piece of cutlery called Passepartout. As I said before, what is important to me to offer accessible cuisine, open to a lot of people. There is this tongue here with acid, bitter, soft, crunchy, sweet, sour written on top of the tongue. So to create a dish that people may like as a whole, we have to think of this image, this slide that I have in my office, and that's the starting point of the entire universe, creating a balance among contrasts. The balance among contrasts is the basis of what should be a new cuisine, of a cuisine that should actually entice the whole palate. This is a different slide on design. The most important base for this is dishes and glasses. What is important to me is the container. I want a container that adds value to the contents. The cook, as a cook, I have to cook, and whatever I cook should be enhanced by a container which is in line with the contents. This is a deep dish, sort of bowl. It's deeper, 1 centimeter deeper and 1 centimeter larger than the classical dishes. And so far, so good. There's nothing special. If you look at the inside, look at the drawing, there is a side that is tilted or slanted so that you don't have to tilt the dish to end up what is inside the dish. You know, according to the best rules of the table, you shouldn't leave a food in the dish. First of all, out of respect for the cook, out of respect for the farmer producing what you're eating, and to comply with this approach, you should finish up your dish. If you tilt the dish, If you tilt the dish, that's not good. So we designed a dish that doesn't need to be tilted to eat up the content. Same thing for the glass. This is more focused on the eco-sustainable glasses. This is not crystal. I wanted them to be glass to avoid breakages. And there is a cut, a design of the glass that allows you to appreciate wine even more. If you drink from the tallest part of the glass, your nose is closest to the wine. So the scents of the wine are better perceived. And so this is a way to enhance the value and enjoyment of wine. This is my latest book. It was published about 5 months ago. In this book, I talk about ethics and compliance and respect in the kitchen. So it's not a recipe book. It's the recipe of my life that I lived behind the stoves, with my experience, with my respect. Respect for the cook means respect for the season, for the products, for the masters, as I said before. It means respect for your collaborators and your suppliers. And finally, respect for your guests. So you have all this range of types of respect. If you comply with the whole range, the guests would benefit automatically. These are two new products combined with Dough and Cucina Pop. We are designing those two projects. H2 Dough is a project based on water tasting, especially sparkling water, flat water to be tasted in a special glass. And iDish is the identification of the grip for service. This is done for design, but before the beauty, we think of the efficiency of the project. We were talking about technology before. Let me just say a few words to conclude with reference to the kitchen and technology. I think, lately, I hear a lot of people talking about technology applied to food. I guarantee to you that there is no technology applied to food. I can only think of a three-function oven, maybe a gel machine or whatever. There are a couple of machines that have been improved but have been around for at least 15 years. That's about technology. Technology that should be used in the kitchen is only the technology that requires using the internet and social networks in the correct way. To understand whether you should buy green peas from South America or if you should rather eat green beans in April when green peas are grown in your local area. So technology in the kitchen is really a technology for information, because thanks God, the kitchen or cooking was and will be a value for the people and something that belongs to handicraft. And a craftsman is only someone who works with his or her hands. I only depend on the person working the land with his or her hands. The same we do in the kitchen. We use our hands to develop our dishes. The dish is good if you do it and repeat it with the same desire that was taught to you by your master and with passion. So safeguarding and protecting the kitchen or cuisine, including farmers and products, is the only way that we can have a better future. So you asked a question about the future. So, Philippe, as you said, according to some architects, there is no certainty of the future, but I do have a certainty of the future. That's it. Thank you.
So the future can exist, or the future can withstand the present. The future can persist. So I go back to my friend Plessy, and complexy, complex guy. So this is quite a significant question. So I come from a very traditional family from Alsace, a terrible family. Nobody's perfect in this world. And in the past, to drink Bordeaux wines, we used to use very small, short glasses closed with a golden thread, so you couldn't smell the Bordeaux. But as this is what we used to do, we didn't think of it. Then there was a slightly larger glass to drink the Bourgogne. Then there was another glass, transparent glass, for Alsace white wines. So these were quite simple and elegant objects. And so this was the dialogue that was set up with silverware and incredible dishes and cutlery. But things change. These glasses do not live any longer. Now very big glasses are produced, and if you put your nose in it, you can smell the breath of the farmer who produced the wine. And you can use it as a fish bowl as well, because it's a big glass. So the way we look at the world has changed. I don't know if we improved the way we look at words. I do remember my glass from Bordeaux. I think it was simple, I think it was cute, and I do remember how good it was to drink the Chianti in a very simple glass, just like this one, with just a small piece of cheese. I'm a sentimental guy. I'm a retro guy, so maybe I'm not the most suitable person to be here. So I am a retro sentimental guy. I think that the future will not base on just one culture for everybody, because we have already had it. There is already a cross-culture, a transversal culture, a hybrid culture. I can't name any names, but I think that you might think of what happens in the US, for instance, and this burger that you can eat all over the world with a tomato and salad. This is a perfect hybrid product. But there is the magic of cassoulet, a French dish that is very peculiar. So a dialogue can be set up with other dishes from Berlin, for instance. So are we going towards a world with just one burger, or are we going to eat different kinds of foods in the future as well, from different countries? For instance, the pasticcio from Genoa and the cassoulet. This is what my world is made up of today, and I want my world to be like that in the future as well. I want a lively, polymorphic world, and I think that crossbreeding, hybridization are important as well. Once I had Goethe at dinner when he came to Italy in 1700, and I served him the spaghetti all'arrabbiata, and he was not familiar with the strong tastes. Why we were? Because in Naples we had regular relationships with the Arabic word. Most of our tastes come from the relationships we used to have with the Arabic word. So our taste comes from dialogues, comes from crossbreedings. We like the felfel, we like very bizarre things. For instance, some Italians couldn't eat butter, while the evolve man eats butter, oil, and the grease that comes from goose and from the pork as well. So there might be different kinds of greases, of fats, and margarine, pork fat. So that's why we are so complex. This introduction to talk with designers. In this complex world, how does a designer design? Please ask him this question. He has short hair, so he has longer ideas. That's a French say. So do you like Bordeaux? Yes, I do like Bordeaux, and I do like other wines as well. So what can I say? I loved to be just part of the audience. I felt very comfortable. I want to be quite brief, because I think it's hard for me to speak Italian, and I do not want to be too long in my presentation, but we're talking about a very interesting idea, a very interesting topic. We are living through a very interesting era, despite all the challenges we are facing. What do I want to tell you? So the idea is the long-lasting value of objects. I speak as a designer. I speak of things I am familiar with. We were programmed based on a modern idea. The future will get better for men. And we are living through this era, and that's the end of this belief now, because this idea used to work perfectly in the past, when we used to live in a timeless era. The only limit was the infinite. Now we are actually facing some limits in terms of energy sources, in terms of space. So from a genetical point of view, we were programmed based on the idea that evolution is better than known evolution. I'm not saying that we should go back to the past. I'm talking about being consistent. I'm talking about consistency. So every single day, we say something new is better than something old. The new product code is much better than the one from last season. The newly opened restaurant is better than the last restaurant from last year.
Quest'idea del nuovo.
So this idea of something new forced us to produce new things. We are forced to produce new things because new means different. And today, we should reprogram our brain because we consume too much. We keep on consuming, and Mr. Mitakara was talking about it. So that's a very interesting idea. Producing objects whose value does not lie within the fact that they're new or old, but these objects last long, they are consistent, they last over time. This is very interesting, and we can do it. We can appreciate what is old, because what is old is part of our memory, and what is new means evolution. But what we need is consistency, silence, something that doesn't move, the lack of mobility. This is not a value yet. I didn't want to be too long in my presentations. Just a couple of examples. The first example is a collaboration with a brand, with an American brand. It's a legendary brand. If you're interested in design, it's Mako. It's an American company. I think you're all aware about the Navy chair. It's an aluminum chair that was produced back in 1948. So it's an aluminum chair whose value is purely functional. There was no desire, affection-related value. It was just a pure functional design. And so I worked with this company, with Emeco, and I designed a chair which was not supposed to be beautiful, new. I was asked to design a neutral chair, a timeless chair, a chair that never goes out of fashion. Sorry. So this chair is supposed to last forever in terms of its function, and I think it was very interesting. I think it's a very interesting intellectual approach. It's an interesting way of designing objects, and this company has its plant in Pennsylvania. You see the Quakers, the Shakers, and their philosophy is this consistency. So these people are not interested in changes just for change's sake. And for instance, they just buy a pair of jeans when they're 18 and they use it all their life long. They do not feel the desire to change. These pair of jeans will last forever. And I think that this idea is very modern. So we shouldn't move towards a hectic evolution. We shouldn't go back to the past. This is way too traditional. But what is important is to work on consistently valuable objects, persistent objects. So it's the idea of consistency, immutability. I designed for Lacoste with a crocodile. This company's turnover is based mostly on the T-shirt, on the polo shirt, 70% of the sales. It was invented in 1933. So what do I do with this brand? Now we're just seeing some examples of my designs for Lacoste. So these are new objects, why I'm talking about timeless pieces. So I work with 20 people, and what we do is making the most of being identical. This polo shirt is always identical. It can't grow old. It shouldn't be an iconic object of a past full of nostalgia. Lacoste polo shirts shouldn't be modern, contemporary either. So people buy Lacoste because they want consistent, immutable objects. And I think this is one of the solutions for designers. We shouldn't just look for materials that can be recycled or green materials. Sometimes I think that designers should work on persistently valuable objects that I buy today, an object that I will own in 20 years' time, and I will feel the same pleasure in holding this object in my hand. So that's the idea of progress, of evolution. I'm not saying that progress is pointless, but sometimes you think of progress for progress' sake. So this is what I wanted to say about this idea.
No, è carino perché è molto difficile esprimere.
So it's very hard to express the idea of history in progress. A bicycle from the 13th century, we do not know it. We do not know how they would design it, and I think it's harder to define a computer from Napoleon's era. So there are some objects that are new because we produce them as new, but if we consider a piano, it will never change. Grand pianos never change. There were some examples dating back to the 1910s, or if you think about a violin or a water closet. So why should they change? A spoon was the same during the Byzantine era. We might try to change them completely. We could have a spoon and teaspoon combined together, but what's the point? So sometimes objects take revenge. If you exaggerate, if you ask them to do things they can't do, they take revenge. There are very beautiful statuettes from 1400 before Christ, and there's a guy sitting on a chair with a glass, just like the glass we can hold it today, and he's as drunk as we can be drunk today. So there are some stable, steady values in humankind. Well, there are some objects, rifles, for example, that didn't exist in the past. So shapes are kept, but there is something else, and this is the question we are asking today. What kind of future are we designing? So this should give us food for thought. What kind of future are we thinking on? Are we going to do the same things we have been doing so far? Are we going to improve relationships? Are we going to create new boundaries for technologies? And I think I can give the floor to Aldo Cibic, and I think he's the only one that can give us an answer.
Thanks for your trust. Well, I'd like to go back to what John Taggart said before. It's a story that I really like, especially if seen from a human being moving across society today with a family, living in this place, society in a deep crisis. Philippe mentioned Latouche and the happy degrowth by Latouche. There was another socialist minister, can't remember his name, Minister of the Economy a few years ago. He was talking about degrowing. It's a time of development. We have to develop what we have already. So since the topic, if I understood you correctly, is what sort of future lies ahead, well, I believe that after thinking a lot and also showing some design images to depict a possible future, what I think is that we first have to understand what the problem is. We talked about food and food safety, knowing that you can eat and there will be a food future. It's a very complex topic with single a monoculture, or whether we can offer our children some healthy food or not. Oldani actually is the expert in this area, but this goes back to what Mr. Takara said before. The next point in our research work was to say, okay, the city is fascinating, is an incredible place. Thinking of the fast and rich exchange of ideas, and in a city you live with more adrenaline. A lot has also been written on cities. People theorize that only the density of a city can guarantee a safer future. But as a matter of fact, we've never delved into the countryside for the future. What does the countryside represent as compared to the city? I was in London to present a book on megalopolis, and I asked one of the greatest experts that we know about megalopolis, and I said, what happens to the countryside? What is its role? And he said, well, it's out of our scope. So there is this idea, the city eats up everything, but we don't know what they eat in a city. It's like a car without a driver, moving ahead faster and faster. We saw the shard by Renzo Piano that you showed in a slide. It's sold as the ecological tower when he designed it. That sounds ridiculous to me. Anyway, talking about this means talking about life of humans in the future. It means talking about life of a community or a social context. So the challenge in this, and this is a problem that I experience with my working team with which I'm developing these new ideas. The problem is, for instance, the seasonality, Mr. Oldani mentioned it before, is fundamental, is a crucial point. Why can't we eat local seasonal food? the whole system is against that concept. Sorry, the mic is off. Mic is off. You know, there are diets removing red fruits like tomato, whatever. In summer, there are people coming to me who say, I can eat everything except peaches, watermelon, tomatoes, so all the fruits that come in that season. And so that would be the basis. So that's interesting. We started years ago. We started with a project years ago, and we moved on. And it's interesting, since we are talking about the future. What was interesting was the meeting with an agricultural entrepreneur from a farmer, an entrepreneur from Parma. So design may offer ideas, but now more than ever, unless you have a multidisciplinary team working with you on these topics, a designer can only come up with nice ideas, but they wouldn't go anywhere to contribute to shape in the future. I'm referring to this event, this meeting with the farmer, because it was a strong meeting. It was impactful. When you showed the markup on the agricultural produce from the farmer to the supermarket in downtown Milan, that's important. It makes you understand how you can generate new communities living more in line with nature that do not feel cut out of the world. Heterogeneous communities I'm thinking about. One of the most difficult things is to understand the mix of these communities. They cannot be rich communities or hippies living together in a community. But because of the need that we have, there is less money, there is a problem of a shortage of products, or produce rather. So the aesthetics of this kind of life is fundamental for me as a designer. I mean, it's not like you have to go back to be a farmer in line with the concept of happy degrowth. The point is, as the farmer said, with 30 hectares of land being rotated seasonally with different cultures, you can get 85% of your food needs met with that land, with a saving of this much percent, because you can use, the fodder from Parma to feed the cows. You can reduce costs. So the idea was to set up a number of closed circuits to avoid waste. Like the houses can be cooled with the water from the pit, which is 88 degrees cold in summer. So use that water to irrigate your fields or to give to the animals. So he was thinking about a sustainable world in energy terms. However, what was interesting in approaching a person who has a different type of knowledge from me was that, he said, I don't know what this place may become. So from the viewpoint of what sort of society would originate, or the aesthetics of that place, what will the houses look like? Is it a more nomadic type of life, or it's not going to be a villa or an apartment? It must be something more flexible. It's something that probably will happen in the future. We have to see whether there will be a total polarization on the cities. So they say that by 2050, 80% of people will live in megalopolis, or if we may think of a type of design that leads to a rebalancing without people rushing into the cities. That would be quite dangerous. So dangerous future would be a totally unconscious one of running towards the city. Or if we can come up with aesthetic solutions in which living close to agriculture, living in the countryside, knowing that with technology we can be more self-sufficient from a food and energy standpoint. But the missing piece, and this is what interests me most, is a type of community that will develop. thinking about our memories, we can come up with the idea of kibbutz or hippie communities or communist community, but that's a bit restrictive. So the idea is to understand what sort of community may thrive there. And this is it. Well, it's very difficult to understand what kind of world lies ahead without a starting hypothesis. There are three possible hypotheses. The first one is let everything as it is, change nothing. The other one was socialism in a single world. Better not think about that option, the way it went. So we would be condemned to Gulag or Kremlin. Well, if you're lucky, you get the best of the best world. Otherwise, you get the worst. The third option is utopia, which is not bad because utopia is not realistic. It will never happen. So you're safe. So it's feasible. So what sort of utopia can we think of for the future? It's not easy. We just, come up with things and ideas, but we never find a tangible solution. There are possible utopias that conflict with each other. A food utopia, overfeeding, or a psychic utopia. Unless you have strawberries on the 6th of January, you get an existential crisis. Or we may teach that there is nothing better in the world than waiting for strawberries to ripen in May. But in May, strawberries taste fantastic. And then end of June come the cherries. But in Paris, cherries would come on the 14th of July. And in other areas, cherries would be available at the end of July. So that would be extraordinarily fantastic. Should we move toward cherries or should we move cherries towards ours? These are all open options. So what sort of future will there be? Do we need to eat this much? If you eat less, you feel perfectly. Look at Placey. He's 97 and he looks perfect, in perfect health. He looks 48. He eats once a week, right? On Fridays, all right? Because you don't eat meat on Fridays. So these are utopias that we are testing now. And we are doing it in an overfed world. Everybody ate too much. Quality has gone to the lowest levels, and we have to imagine fantastic things. I don't know if industrial spaghetti tastes worse than biological spaghetti. And if instead of costing 1.2 euro per kilo, it costs 2.4 euro per kilo, that's not a big deal. What is important is that the traffic cop in Milan doesn't fine me for 400 euro for a no parking ticket, because that would cost 400 packs of pasta. So you, especially the designer and the cook as well, the cook is also an artist as well as a designer. So your task is to imagine a different world. What we have is not perfect. We know a lot of the things that don't work, and we know why they don't work, and we know that we have to go through a number of steps. It's a design that should be based on the surrounding reality, but we should be bold enough and able enough to design projects that are in line with what is shaping up to be a reality that's different from today's reality. It's not easy. When we were young, we all thought the same thing. We were all wearing the same jackets, like Mao Zedong. Some of them wore it in beige, others in blue. Now we can only see ourselves with different jackets in cashmere. Well, probably a cashmere jacket is better than Mao Zedong's jacket. So what are the expectations that lie behind? Can we give up on some luxury to have more stereotyped? Would you rather listen to Passion Bell on the CD or what? I would like to know what Mr. Takara thinks about this topic.
I think many of the...
Sorry, the question is very simple. Is culture a possible alternative to overfeeding people?
I think it's the vanity and the illusion of us on this platform to think that it will be our choice. I think, firstly, probably half the population of the world is hungry now because of the way that the system is organized. And I think that the difficulties of meeting basic needs will increase for everybody, except for maybe the 1% will be the last to be hungry, but they will have insecurity and other problems to deal with. So I think that basically talk of utopias or imagining solutions that's an old-fashioned way to think about it. We are going to have all sorts of unexpected challenges to deal with, and to my mind, the task of the designer is to be one of the different ways that we deal with unexpected challenges. So when I hear Aldo Cibic talk about the rural communities, I totally love the idea that he's talking to somebody, in his words, who has totally different knowledge to him, a farmer, because I think the farmer would probably be grumpy, but the farmer would be very happy to meet a designer. In the same way that when I talk to people in India who are struggling about the future of their land, they're very happy to meet a designer. They're also very happy to meet an agroecologist. They're happy to meet all sorts of people because they need a whole variety of skills. So it's not that we designers have some terrible responsibility to come up with the right answer. All that is over of the vision. It's kind of adapting and making beautiful the things that we will fix on a rather short-term basis. That's my strong expectation.
D'accordo.
So, what should we do? Can I use a metaphor? A simple metaphor. This afternoon, here we are like a sandwich. We have bread, and then we have butter, ham, some salad in the sandwich. And I think we eat horizontally. Whereas a sandwich, in order to have all the tastes together, you have to bite it vertically. So as to have the mix of different tastes and flavors. I see each and every one of us placed in his own habitat. It's like eating horizontally, I guess. And I don't know why, because I eat horizontally too. I mean, I'm not saying that we should go across things, but we should develop a global vision. What is lacking today? In the 15th century, the small painter and the big artist, I mean, none of them had the same ideal of beauty. They had different ideals of beauty. Today, we are divided into a sort of a mosaic world where everyone is responsible for its own piece in the mosaic. And we don't have a general overall vision, the overall imagination that we really, really all need. I don't know what it really means. Well, you said it. But, you know, talking amongst us, I have the feeling that everyone is like an island, and we cannot see beyond the island, above and below the island. We only see our own layer. And I'm the first to be in this category. I see only art, he sees cooking. Cibic focuses on architecture and only sees architecture. You know, I think we should put a bit of food, a bit of architecture, a bit of design, a bit of philosophy in the same pot, so as to develop a humanistic type of vision. Because otherwise, each of us will give a limited contribution. I mean, it's beautiful to rediscover these things. We are like islands or archipelagos without a global vision, which is what we really need. Well, Mr. Thakara is a philosopher.
The metaphor of the archipelago, I must say, because I spent the whole of my life telling people on islands that they should stop being so specific to themselves, and they always ignore me. So I've come to the conclusion that it was stupid advice. But if you have a lot of different traditions and cultures on an archipelago, then one can make the journey from one to another rather easily. And I think it's the making of the bridges that is important, not the kind of telling people to get off their island. I want him to be a cook. I don't want him to be a philosopher. I think that's pretty important. You want to be a... No, you go hungry being a philosopher. I warn you about that.
Sì, no, volevo solo dire, sono d'accordo, però...
I agree, but I think it's the beginning. We should find a common platform. I mean, we said what we said during this meeting, and then we should call in a farmer, a citizen, a philosopher, whatever. But the result is a multidisciplinary work. One single discipline or profession cannot build the whole story. The whole story can only be the result of the contribution of different people. We need an economist, someone who...
Ecco.
Forse ci vuole un filosofo.
Well, a philosopher is certainly needed, but one who knows the history of thinking, and going back to the history of thinking, identifies possible areas of exchange. That's the purpose of philosophy. Otherwise, everybody would be a philosopher. Philosophy by itself is a bit more complex. There is a very precise thinking called eschatology. Eschatology. Where are we going to go? What should we end up with? The first position of an eschatological Western thinking is what you find in the first pieces of Genesis in the Bible. When looking at the world, he created Chibich and said to him, Mr. Chibich, your task is to eat fish, dominate nature, eat animals, and multiply yourself infinitely. And so Chibich started reproducing himself infinitely and created a human species. So the message is hard to share it today because we cannot conquer more than the world that we've already conquered. We conquered everything. For the tribes in Israel, that message meant to open up to the desert, to the seas. We cannot continue to eat fish. We ate all the tuna fish that was in the sea. So that message is not applicable to our reality. It's a message from an eschatological critical standpoint. Now, this interpretation has gone on in the history of thinking, and especially it took hold in philosophies with a teleological visions that are imagining to get somewhere. This is not the case in Indian thinking because they have a cyclic vision. It's not the case for ancient Greek thinking that distinguished the concept of aion from the concept of chronos, the time going round and round and the time going forward. And it's the case of our civilization, the time of progress. We think that time goes in a direction. We're still teleological today. We believe in a path where from a certain point on there is the Holy Jerusalem. For Krupp, it was the biggest steel factory. Everybody imagined its own Holy Jerusalem. For stuff, furniture, it was the top, for macaroni, macaroni manufacturer, it was to be the biggest manufacturer. This is what generates a big demand. But maybe we took the wrong road, the wrong direction. So a bizarre job becomes important here. That is the job of thinking. We live at a time when philosophy, I'm happy that Mr. Tucker is a philosopher by trade, You know, the determination of passages from the culture of the 19th century that imagined to have a systematic hypothesis in front of itself. We imagine the end of history with the abolition of a conflict among classes, social classes, the bearded guy. The other one imagined the end of history with the emancipation of the supreme, the Übermensch, remember Nietzsche with the mustache? But then we are here in the 21st century. We started off with Wittgenstein, an excellent thinker coming from math. He said the only purpose for philosophy is to describe itself, because any other projection is impossible. We continued with other thinkers who said the only true thing, Jean-Paul Sartre, we are faced with nothing. So that's the reality. We live in a reality where thinking has become weaker, minimal, and systematic thinking needs to be reinvented. That's the purpose of philosophy, and it should also be the purpose of politics. Not the pedigree politics. Ciccarini has a pedigree. Oh, I'm sorry, not the old style politician, the dominion of the world, the control of the world with him at the head of the world. I'm thinking of the gray-haired guy who is becoming popular on TV. What's the future then? What if the future lied in knowledge and education? What if the future of humanity were in the brain and a bit in the heart? Then we could rediscuss the shape of glasses and the quality of wine. This is just a provocation, but I then wanted to give this provocation, and now I hand over to Cibic because that's the world he wants.
No, il tema è molto più
I know that this topic is so complicated. I didn't know how we can tackle this topic. We might have a technical approach. We might calculate energy saving, energy consumption, potential growth of human beings on the Earth. What's the relationship we have with collapsing ecosystems? So we might think that the world is made up of clients, bad clients and potential clients. What kind of relationships can we think of? That there are some crazy people that think that a computer will take the world over, but we just put a magnet in the computer and the computer will collapse. People think that there will be so many conflicts. There are so many different pathways. The only thing that counts, that matters, is design, making the most of workforce. We have talked about computers, we have talked about philosophy, but we forgot people, the craftsmanship of people. Using your hands to do things. We use computers, we use TV screens to do things, to communicate. I agree with you, but we forgot one thing. If we want a farmer to work, we should explain him what he should do, but nobody wants to do that. We should get to the point where we re-enhance some jobs that aren't accessible any longer, that are inconceivable in today's world, and this is what we should do. This is what we try to do in our kitchen, in the cooking world. We try to exchange ideas, we try to talk about a specific way of conceiving food, we try to conceive suitable menus. We want to be proper, we want to be clean, we do not want people to overeat. We studied Lescoffier. He said that we shouldn't replicate tastes and textures, and we try to put all this into practice because we eat more than we should eat. This is the only problem. So that's why there should be culture. We should explain people that you're supposed to eat a certain amount of food and you should not buy all that food. You said you could buy a packet of pasta of 2.40 euros instead of 1.20 euros. You can say that here, but journalists, press and TVs say that when there is a 10 cent increase in the price of pasta, that's the end of the word. Do you know how much pasta you need for a good dish? 60 grams. That's all. 70 grams plus 30 grams, so that's 100 grams. That's all. Think of how many times you cook pasta. You cook 200 grams and you say, okay, I will heat it the day after, so I think I'm smart because I recycle, but you're not smart. You should think before acting. This is the only thing we should do. Okay, we should be less philosophers, just like he said. He said he wanted to be a cook. Good. And I wish I could have said something more about cooking. My book talks about ethics. This is exactly what I wanted to do. Ethics, philosophy that work on a daily life. I burned the hair on my hand when I was cooking today. So what we need is practice. We need to do our jobs. This is what we are lacking. We should just talk about the things we do. Everybody can talk, but we have student cooks that come to us from all over the world, and the first thing that he does interviews, 1 year-long interview, because we wanted to understand whether the student cook, actually agrees with our philosophy. And I was called by Harvard University in the US. They have set up a case history of my restaurant, so it doesn't deal with how to cook a pasta dish, but it's a case history about the approach to our job, to our work. And they did that because our case history can be applied to cooking and to many other businesses. What is important is the human relationship. So we think that we know people because we have 5,000 Facebook friends, but we should give words the right value. We should communicate. Chef or cook, I'm no chef, I'm a cook, or I'm a chef de cuisine. But please use the right words. If there is no proper, clean communication, I don't think we can't move any further. We can use so many words, but the problem is still there. Anything else you'd like to add, all of you? No, it's time to go to the kitchen. Thank you.